Get started with our webinar. So welcome to the Women in Leadership for Finance webinar. I'm Nicola Brooks, and today our session is on authentic leadership. We're joined by our guest speaker, Nicci Briggs, and my co-host for today is Sarah Stansfield. So before I introduce you to them, just some quick housekeeping. Please, if you could switch your video off, I think most of you have done that anyway, just so we can focus on our speaker today. And put yourself on mute unless obviously you want to ask a question. There will be lots of opportunity to ask questions as we get into the discussion with Nicci. So please do either type the question into the chat or raise your virtual hand when you want to ask a question. We're aiming to finish at 5:55. I'll do a quick roundup and then I'll probably stay on for about 15 minutes after if you want to have a chat again. So on to authentic leadership. So Zoe and I first set this network up to encourage more female senior leaders in NHS finance by breaking down some of the internal barriers and some of the external barriers. It occurred to me that an external barrier could be not having a role model who looks like you or acts like you for you to look up to, or feeling that you have to fit a particular mould of what a traditional finance director, deputy finance director, or CFO would look like, for example. Our speaker today, Nicci Briggs, is the epitome of being yourself. I was one of the guests at her table at the HFMA last December at the National Conference, where she was given the award of HFMA Finance Director of the Year. And it was clear how she operates and how being herself gains respect from her peers and from her team, and in fact from anyone that comes into contact with Nicci. To introduce us to Nicci, we're joined by my co-host today, Sarah Stansfield. Thank you, Sarah. She's the CFO for Northamptonshire ICB, herself an accomplished finance leader. So Sarah, can I hand over to you just now to introduce yourself with your own background and then to introduce us to Nicci. Thank you.
Thank you, Nicola, and hi everybody. I'm Sarah Stansfield, officially for 4 days now, Chief Finance Officer for the Northamptonshire Integrated Care Board and Deputy Chief Exec of the Northamptonshire CCG for 2.5 years or so prior to that. Before that role, I was Executive Director of Finance for Gloucestershire Hospitals, and have a long history in the NHS provider finance sector, and also somewhere in there a couple of years as part of EY's healthcare consultancy team as well thrown in. So a long history around NHS finance with a much more generalist slant for the past couple of years, and have taken the opportunity to pick up a CFO's baton again as part of the creation of ICBs. Nicci and I worked together in the same system for quite a long time in Northamptonshire, so know each other pretty well. And hence, Nicola and Nicci asked me to co-host the session today. I'm going to start by asking Nicci just to introduce herself for those of you who don't know her, and then I'm going to, Nicola and I will kick off with some questions to get us started. Nicci.
Thanks. It's always a pleasure. A, to spend some time with Nicola, but B, to be able to catch up with Sarah as well. So my name's Nicci Briggs. I'm currently a bit like Sarah, 4 days into the CFO role for Leicestershire and Rutland ICB, and in about 4 weeks we'll be joining Cambridgeshire and Peterborough as their CFO for the ICB. Prior to that, I spent 10 years at Kettering General Hospital, 4 of them as the Director of Finance. Potted history really, Director of Transformation with Kettering, and then before the NHS, took a bit of a tour of the public sector in terms of I worked for the Northamptonshire Police, Cambridge County Council, and I always say I started my career with by saving lives and stopping heavy petting as a lifeguard. So that's maybe what made me eventually settle in the NHS. So yeah, that's very brief background from me.
Thanks, Nicci. So I'm going to kick us off with so we're talking about authentic leadership today. So my first question would be, describe to us what authenticity is for you. What does authentic leadership look like for Nicci Briggs?
So I'm not, anyone that knows me knows that I'm not a person to read a whole load of management books. So you're not going to get some kind of, real professional quote from me. I think for me, authentic leadership is being yourself and making room for others. And I think it's as simple as that. I think for me, there's three key things about it. One is listening. I think that the best leaders are those that listen to people and give opportunity for people to be able to feedback. I think empathy is a massive plus in being an authentic leader, just any kind of leader, having empathy. And then I think the role modeling. So be the person you want to be, behave how you expect people to behave, and share your stories. It's too many times we have people that, that I think that particularly with our generation, the kind of millennials and people that are starting to come through, the ivory tower and the hierarchical way of working just isn't respected anymore. And they want to see people that are like them. So for me, it's absolutely about just being yourself and trying to share some of that, so that then, people feel like they can engage and you can start to listen to them and be really open and engaging.
Thank you. And for us as a group of, I think we're exclusively women on the call, but for us as a group of women in leadership and finance, interested as to kind of what you think we can add that's different to that conversation, and all the responsibility we have in leadership to add something different to that conversation.
So I think it's interesting. We've talked about this. With Nicola. I think it's shocking actually that some, what is it, 2/3 of finance teams are female, yet only 25-26% of CFOs are female. It's not right. And then we talk about if we talk about BAME members and stuff. I mean, that's even worse. There's less than 5% of CFOs that represent that background. Which I find it shocking, to be honest, that we're in 2020. We're in the NHS. Which actually, then when you look at the NHS, never mind about finance, the predominance of women, and particularly in leadership positions in some of those other professions, we're behind the times, to be fair, and yet we've got so much to add. A board that has more female representation, a board that has more BAME candidates, is going to be a much more rounded board and make better decisions. The studies that go into it, and it doesn't need me to say anything about the numbers. What I can say is I think that one of the massive traits that I think that we can add, and actually is, I think a lot of people used to see it as a weakness, if you're talking going back kind of not that long, 5-10 years, is empathy. I think it's it's something that I think women seem to be better at than men. I don't know if it's something we're born with, or it's just something that's more natural and innate for women to be. So I think it's such a positive to have that skill. Yet it's something that people feel it almost, I don't know about you, Sarah, it was definitely almost trained out of me. And there are lots of male leaders, in particular male CFOs, that I worked with as well, who kind of, the things that they said was, if you can't be friends with people that you work with, you need to have gravitas. That's what you need to be a CFO. And actually, I really don't think it is. I think it's to have empathy. Particularly in the NHS, we don't pay bonuses. You don't get anything to work for. You can probably be, in finance terms, you can probably get paid a lot more working for other organisations, working for the private sector. So the one thing that we can do is make it a really good place for people to work, a really positive place for people to develop in. And to do that, you have to be able to empathise with where people are coming from, the situations that they find themselves in, and also, that each person that works for you will offer something different. It's how you get the most out of them. Being aloof and having gravitas isn't going to make people want to work for you. And I've been really, just really grateful for the fantastic teams that I've managed to have and create, and people that have moved with me in my career as well. And people move with you if they are inspired by you and want to work for you and feel motivated to work for you. You're not going to get that if you come in and just literally put a name on the door and then close that door and only see people at meetings and things like that. It's about understanding all aspects of your team and what drives them and what motivates them.
There's an interesting view in there, isn't there, as to what gravitas actually is, because there's there's potentially an old school view of what that means. There's potentially a male view, a female view, etc., etc. It's interesting you mentioned the kind of numbers. I was telling Nicola this story. Not that many years ago, I was summoned to my first big NHSI Directors of Finance conversation in London, that thing where they gathered 200 and something people together. My chief exec texted me about halfway through, because it was my first one. She sort of said, "How's your day?" And I said, "Well," I said, "it's all right, but this is the first NHS finance meeting I've ever been to where I don't have to queue for the toilet." And it just kind of marks out the whole room when you walk in there. I think it's a real, as you say, I think it's a travesty, to be honest, because we need to see both people that look like and people that support the leadership model, don't we?
Yeah, absolutely.
Nicola, I don't know if you want to come in.
Can we go back to? Yeah, I was going to say, can we go back to what you were saying about gravitas? I think that's a really good point. And I think it may well have changed over the years, or for people that are on this call who are perhaps still being held to that old-fashioned view of what gravitas is, and yet now they're listening to Nicci and Sarah and frame this slightly differently. So how can you talk us through, Sarah, you might want to jump in with your experience as well, how you've managed to make those two things work simultaneously, so still to be in a position where you have gravitas, you can lead meetings, you're in charge of your trust or now your ICB, but at the same time you can still connect with individuals on a one-to-one basis, and yeah, make them want to work for you because they know that you've got their back and that you care for them and that you're interested in them and that you support them.
So do you want me to kick off and then I'll pass to you, Sarah? So I think it's a tricky one if you're going. I remember I was put forward, I was acting up into the CFO role in Kettering, and they decided, because the board for the past 5 or 6 directors of finance have purposely gone outside the NHS, because if you go outside the NHS, that's obviously where all the much brainier people are. It's where they're much more commercially focused, and the NHS needs people that have no clue about the NHS. That was the view of boards back in the kind of 5, 6, 7, 8 years ago, 10 years ago probably. That whole competitive, let's make the NHS, if we introduce competition and we introduce lots of private sector people, then they'll make the NHS more efficient. Actually, I think we went through probably the most inefficient time in the NHS with the encouragement of consultancy firms and other things. And I was acting up into the CFO role for I think about 8-9 months, and they decided that I wasn't good enough on my own to just go for it. I had to be seen across other candidates, so they went on a big national, very expensive recruitment campaign to prove that there was other people probably better than me to do it, I imagine was the view of the board at the time, despite me managing to keep them out of special measures and a whole load of other things. And I remember them saying, "You need to go on interview training." I thought, well, that's nice, they're offering me interview training. And I said, "Can I ask what you think my areas of development for?" And they said, "Gravitas. So you need to go on interview training to train and learn about gravitas." And I thought, well, no interview training in the world's going to teach me about gravitas. And they were saying, you're moving from a deputy role into a CFO role in the same organisation. You were seen as acting, you were seen as one of the team. You need to be able to tell the board that you're going to go into that role as the director of finance, CFO, and have the gravitas of that role. And I spent ages worrying about it, to be honest, and then I just kind of thought, sod it, and then thought, well, gravitas only comes when you've shown that you can do the job and that you've demonstrated it. And I've spent 9 months demonstrating it, and I've managed to demonstrate in front of national monitor colleagues, as they were at the time. I'd managed to get us out of the naughty step in terms of where we were supposed to be headed, where we were heading in financial special measures. I've got a cohesive team. We're churning out all of the information that we need to do, gone through the audit process. So actually that's what gave me the gravitas. So when it came to the interview questions, it's the ability to say that you can stand behind your experience and lead an organisation, not necessarily just lead a team. It's to be there on behalf of, you're the expert in terms of finance, but actually you're there as a member of a unitary board to be able to have the confidence, I think, to be able to ask those questions about quality, about other areas, to make challenges. And I think that's where you get gravitas from. It's not a case of power dressing. It's not a case of someone you ditching all of the friends that you've made in the 10 years you worked for an organisation. Actually, those were the people that helped me get the gravitas, because they were the people that I could call upon when I needed help, when I didn't understand something, when I wanted to have the conversations outside the room, and, you know, that kind of, oh, bleep bleep moment when you shut the door and think, the buck stops with me, who can I talk to in this organisation? And that's how you use those kind of contexts. And if you didn't have those people and you went in, you know, this kind of aloof power dressing CFO, I think you'd very quickly find, particularly the NHS, people see through you, and they see through that, particularly from a clinical perspective. And you just, if you don't have the buy-in from the rest of the organisation, it genuinely doesn't matter how good a CFO you are. You're not going to get anything done in the NHS unless you can really tap into those clinical and operational teams as well as your own team.
And
Thanks.
I fully agree with Nicci. In fact, I think for gravitas is interesting, but I suppose observationally, you can't have it if you don't have trust. For me, I'd much rather people trusted me than thought I had gravitas. I agree with the comment that's literally just been made in the chat. Gravitas is about perception for me. There are people who I know in the NHS past have been described as having gravitas, and I wouldn't trust them as far as I could throw them. And so I think for me, I've always worked, it's about relationships, it's about authenticity, it's about trust, and that's how you get things done. And you don't need what somebody else perceives as gravitas to be able to do that, or at least I don't think so. But that's a mindset that we need to kind of change for others as well as for ourselves, which is one of the challenges, I think.
Thanks, Sarah. That's a really interesting insight, and I would agree with that as well. It's very relative, isn't it? Daryl's asked a really good question, going back to what you were saying about compassion and empathy, Nicci. Daryl on the chat said, I agree with your 3 values, and you're correct that men are not as good as at empathy. Actually, Daryl, I'm asking your question on behalf of you. Do you want to put your video on and ask it, if you're there? I just realised once I started to talk on your behalf that you might want to ask a question yourself.
You're doing a great job, Nicola. Yeah, it was just really, I mean, I agree with everything you've said, Nicci, so far, but I was just thinking, well, what else can men learn from the strengths of women? And then there's a little post about the change in the collaborative way of working, and I would argue that probably plays to the strength of women as well. So it could facilitate a sea change.
I hope so, Darryl, and I think you know, this isn't what we need to recognise is that everyone has their own strengths. So just because you know, just because it's you're a female doesn't automatically mean that you're full of empathy or anything like that. But there are certain strengths and characteristics that do seem to be more you know, more predominant in females than in males. But to me, I think you're right on the partnership process and the collaboration. I think that when I speak to colleagues, and again, kind of talking not that long ago, you know, I'm 40 this weekend, so I'm not that old, and I don't have to go back very far to be in the position that Sarah's in, where you walk into forums with directors of finance and they're all male. But I think there's very much the way the NHS worked, and in that time, you know, kind of going back 6, 7, 8 to 10 years ago, it was very competitive, and it was a win-win, you know, win-lose situation. Negotiations were done where someone had to feel like they were winning, and I do think that's just because of the way that male sports are. It's very much like that. Whereas from a female perspective, I think we are much more about creating a win-win situation where everyone can leave the table and feel like they've gained something from that scenario, rather than it being that, you know, someone has to lose. And I think that that's absolutely the positive that hopefully will come from the ICB part of the world.
I'm interested, Nicci, if I can. Because we talked a little bit about it. We know I haven't actually yet seen the list of 42 and the names of the CFOs next to them all. But I think just based on kind of personal view, we can know that nowhere near 50, 60, 70% of ICB CFOs are going to be women. How do we, particularly given what we've described as potentially natural strengths in terms of collaboration, trust, empathy, etc., why do you think that is, therefore, and what might we between us as a group do about it? How do we give either women the confidence they need or influence panels as to what they think they want?
So I think that was talking to Nicola about this. I think that take a look at chief execs, take a look at chairman, take a look at the non-exec directors, particularly from a finance perspective. When you look at a board, there are quite a lot of females on that board, but when you look at the audit chairs, the chairs of the finance committee and the chairman, chairperson, they're predominantly male. What makes up the interview panel of a CFO, chief exec, chairman, audit committee chair, finance committee chair? And unfortunately, when I've had a look at a number of these posts that have come out, had a look at the interview panels, and also in my career, I have never been interviewed by a female. I've never been interviewed from anyone from a BAME background for the CFO roles that I've gone for. That's 3. So that kind of actually it's 4 if you count another. Yeah, so four CFO roles that I've gone for, and all of them have been old, male, and pale, unfortunately. And I think that's where we have a responsibility to change that, and we have to recognise it's not okay to just put someone on there tokenistically. I think we should be looking across the region at other CFOs and other chair women going on panels, because if a board doesn't recognise that it's not diverse enough, it isn't going to in its new appointments. Whether we like it or not, we all have unconscious bias. And there are some fantastic people that are starting to change that in the way that they're recruiting and the way that they're actively looking at having shortlists. So how do we make sure that the shortlist that we put forward for those boards is 50% female, or actually 70% female? Not that it's the appointment still has to be the right person for the role, but if the shortlist doesn't reflect the finance community, then we've not even got it right to start off with. So I think that there's a responsibility for recruitment firms, a responsibility for boards, but take a look around. I think the interesting point, someone's put in the chat, I think, how many CFOs in the new world actually are going to be female of the 42. I haven't checked that or looked at that, but it'd be interesting how many audit chairs and how many non-execs are female in those posts that appoint female.
I'd like to do that analysis, Nicci. We did we analysed on Friday, actually, out of the 42 appointments, what the gender split was. So I can share that with you if you want. There's 14 women, 27 men, and 1 role which is yet to be appointed, which is the one you're coming out of, Nicci. So hence why it's an odd number. So it works out as 33% women, 66 men. But it would be interesting to look at the boards that have appointed into them, like you say. So taking things on a slightly different angle, or well, I was just about to, but then Jane's put her hand up. So I'll invite Jane to come and ask a question, and then I can go off on a different angle when she's asked it. Jane, are you there?
Yes, thank you, Nicola. Sorry to divert you. I was just wondering, in terms of what the panel sort of think about, in terms of these appointments, is it that women don't apply for it, or they're not successful at it, or a mixture of both?
So I think some of it is around, so I think probably if I was guessing, there'd be 3 reasons. Firstly is that the shortlist isn't reflective. So if there are women applying, I'm not sure that we're going out seeking some of those. So when you look at deputy roles, I think the split is much more favourable and much more reflective. I think second part of it is it goes back to that role modelling. I think that there are a lot of women, and I've been on a number of these calls, and where people feel like there are females feel like they need to get more experience, whereas males seem to be much more confident in putting their hat in the ring. So I'd find that's probably a confidence type thing. And the third reason is because, for personal reasons, normally when I speak to female deputies, there are quite a number of them that just don't want the job. They see it as too much. They're having to give up too much of themselves, too much of their own time, not able to juggle, and have much more responsibilities, or feel much more responsible for that kind of family dynamic side of it. So I'm not sure it's equal between those three, but those are the three. When I've had conversations with people, those are the, consistently the three things that are put forward.
Thanks, Nick. That's really interesting. I guess I was just thinking about it in terms of one of the things, I was talking to somebody else about some of the work they're doing around EDI, and they were saying that at all levels they're starting to put their recruitment adverts and stuff through a sort of gender decoder kind of thing, because it actually, quite a lot of the ways adverts are constructed can use language that unconsciously people will find quite, so things like a strong background is perceived in different ways by different genders. So I just kind of wondered if there was stuff at that level that was actually kind of stopping people thinking about it at that initial kind of stage, as well as maybe then kind of getting into panels that weren't diverse enough and so on. So thank you for that.
I think there's a stat I heard, I don't know how accurate it is, but there's a stat I heard some time ago which said women worry if they haven't got 100% of the things on a person's specification. Men will apply for a job at 50%. Just in terms of the kind of level of the things that we the perceptions we put on ourselves as to the experience we think we have and the things we think we need. And our ability potentially from a confidence point of view just to have a go sometimes. I think, Jane, it's probably absolutely possible that if you looked at the applications for CFO posts, you'd have many fewer women applying, as well as many fewer being shortlisted for a number of the reasons that Nicci's kind of eloquently described.
Yeah, lovely. Thank you.
Thanks for that question. So some really good points coming through on the chat. And Scott was my colleague, as mentioned, and we're talking about wording and advertising, using more words like empathy, if that's what's more important, and compassion rather than gravitas. So that's quite food for thought there. Fine. I was going to ask you a couple of things, Nicci. Actually, it sounds like you've always sort of followed your own path. But have you ever felt under pressure to look or act a certain way in the workplace, and how have you dealt with that when you have? Because equally you're ambitious. Everyone wants to to move on and progress, and it can be harder when you're still sort of making your name, can't it? I mean, now you've got a bit of experience under your belt, and it's easier to be your authentic self. Yeah,
I think so. Is it easy when you're starting out? Absolutely not. So I do recognise, and I think if I'd have answered this question when I was a deputy, a head of finance, even in like acting up into the first CFO role, was it easy to be myself? No. Was I always myself? Yes. A bit like I think someone put in the comment, it's too hard. I haven't got enough time in the day or brain power, I don't think, to try and be anyone else. And I'm extremely bad at lying, always have been. So, I think that it's a form of that. I'm sure that, so acting or anything like that would never be up in my forte. But you do feel pressure. As I said, I talked about that interview training, but we had, when I was acting up and we were in that grey area of about to be in special measures, the NHS-INE appointed one of these kind of turnaround directors, and they were extremely experienced, held many national roles, was a woman as well, and told me that I needed to change my whole outfit. I should consider wearing suits. Anyone that's met me, I've never worn a suit in my life. So and all of those things, because that's what I need to do. So yeah, it's, and that happened. I'm talking 6 years ago. We're not talking back in the 80s. This is in the 2010s. And that still goes on, and there is still that train of thought. So to rally against it is, and especially when it's someone so experienced, they've been put in your organisation to help you, support you, to help you grow and all of that, and you sit there and think, well, this, you know, I'm not sure. Do I need to go and change my outfit? And I find the best people to tap into then are either people that have known you all your life, like your parents or someone like that, say, no, actually, do you know what, I got here being me. I managed to get the job, managed to do the job by being me. It's time to just be confident in that person, and there is a bit of, to be honest, fake it till you make it. You know, the first day when I walked in and I'd got a phone call on a Friday night saying, can you come in on the Monday and be the director of finance? I remember shutting that door and thinking, holy, it stops with me. And it suddenly felt really lonely. And then you remembered, actually, all of the people that worked with me are still working with me. I've just got a different job title. I need to still tap into those people and use those networks and use the rapport that I've got with my team, because actually I think they'll pull together and help me. And actually it's okay to say, listen guys, sometimes I'm not going to know what I'm doing, I'm going to need your help. And I think it's being able to say that, and people buy into that much more than you walking in and all of a sudden, you know, you were their director of finance, you know, you were their director of transformation, you were their deputy director of finance on a Friday, and all of a sudden on Monday you're the director of finance, to start acting weird. You know, I think they probably call it out more than I would, but I'm also a kind of person that, despite having a mortgage and everything else to pay for, I'll walk out of an organisation if someone tries to make me compromise my values. I just don't think it's worth it. I can't work for people that I just don't respect or don't have similar values as me, and once people try and make, and that's fine, you know, you can work for them and you can get along, but once you feel like your values are being compromised, or you're being asked to make too many changes about you as a person, that's the point to throw your hat in, walk away and look for the next opportunity, to be honest. And there's been a few of those, and you do have to stick to your guns, because a career is a career. You're yourself for the rest of your life. You don't want to look back and think, I did something for a job that I just have compromised who I am. And I also find it, you know, I couldn't sit here and talk to people about authenticity and leadership and things like that thinking I'd sat there and compromised something myself in my own career and in my past experiences.
Yeah, thanks for that. And Sarah, do you want to add anything there, or shall I crack on with the next?
I was just going to kind of follow up if I can, Nicola, which is, Nicci, you're describing quite a big burden, aren't you, in some ways? I've kind of held it myself at the same time. How do you, when you carry that sort of responsibility, because I think it is a responsibility, how, you've talked about networks, you've also talked about kind of personal relationships, parents, friends, etc. It's really important, I think, to keep yourself grounded while you're trying to manage that. How do you do that?
I was people who know me have a really dry sense of humour, and I don't.
Oh, she's back.
Yeah. Can you hear us, Nicci?
Hopefully I'm back again on the iPads.
Yeah.
So I'll join back on my computer. Hopefully our organisation's doing an IT update at 5:30 in the evening. So that's a good thing though, doesn't it? It means everyone else has to switch off. So I think lost my train of thought slightly about the burden. So those people that know me know that I probably come up with a sarcastic response about going to the pub or drinking wine or making some kind of light-hearted joke, but I think that's it. I think you have to keep your sense of humour. I think you have to. I think I'm much better at it now than I was when I first started. I think you try and be everything to everyone, and I think actually the best thing to realise is that we're all fallible, and that we'll all get things wrong, and it's okay, and it's as long as you don't get the big things wrong. But the worst thing that can happen is you become indecisive, because the most frustrating people to work for are the ones that are indecisive. So I work very much on the 80-20 rule. You know, 80% of the time I'll get it right, 20% of the time I'll get it wrong. But actually, if I make that decision quickly, I've got time to fix it. So even the 20% I can go and fix if I make the decision quick enough. So it's being able to back yourself. It's being able to switch off. You know, there's two phrases that people who know me, I used to write them on the whiteboard in the office that I'll say. One is, some days you're the statue and other days you're the pigeon, and you've just got to accept it. You know, the days that you're the pigeon, you just got to sit there and think it's just been a bad day. And, you know, there's a whole load of stuff that's rained on me. And, you know, but it's not gloating on the days that you're the pigeon either. And you're only as good as the team that work for you. So I think this goes back to that role model in it. So I protect my Friday afternoons. If anyone tries to book a Friday afternoon meeting with me, they get lynched. It's being able to take that me time. I spend more than enough time at work. I don't feel the need to have to log on all the time at weekends. You know, the workload will still be there on a Monday. And the best that I can be is someone that's energized, that has fun, that has got a work-life balance. And I think that's the key things for me, of being able to switch off, do things that you find fun, do things that you enjoy doing. The job, no one's going to build a statue to you when you leave. You know, I'll be replaced. I might have been great for 2 years at LLR, but I'll be replaced, and they'll probably do just as good a job. And it's kind of accepting that while you're there and while you're in an organisation, yes, they get 120% out of me, but when it's me time, it is absolutely my time. And I'm a massive believer that you don't need to be doing 60, 70-hour weeks. You really shouldn't be. No job is that hard. You know, if you've got a good team, you can do reasonable hours. You should be able to log off early on a Friday. You should be able to go for a walk at lunchtime. You should be able to just, you know, finish at 2 if that's what you want to do. Because people are much better if they're, you know, able to work and have that work-life balance. I think, gone are the days of doing 60, 70-hour week, because it's just not, you're just going to get burnt out. I worry most in the NHS. Sarah, you'll know, because there was a regional director of finance meeting in the Midlands on Friday, and I asked the question, because if you look at it, we've got 3 year ends, we've got a planning round, they're on about doing a 3 to 5 year planning cycle. I'm really worried that staff are going to be burnt out, because we've already done about 10 planning rounds in the last 2 years. And I asked the region what they thought about and how much they considered staff health and well-being in all of this work and all of the extra work they're asking finance to do. And I got the answer yes, yet they went on to the next task that they wanted us all to do. So I kind of left that feeling like, well, we're left to it. I don't know what you thought, Sarah, but I kind of thought, well, I've now got a duty to make sure that my team have, you know, that I push back, that I set the right deadlines, that I negotiate with those kind of people regionally and nationally, and just say, this isn't on. We need to protect our teams and really got to focus on health and well-being. Otherwise, we're just going to have people leave the NHS and it's in droves.
I absolutely agree with you. I think as leaders, we have a real responsibility, to challenge that behaviour and then not to pass it down. I think observationally, I think COVID's really hurt in that respect. So I think because of particularly how COVID was managed nationally and this need for kind of a 7-day response across the NHS, regional and national colleagues in particular, apologies to those on the call, have become really used to being able to get very, very short turnaround information almost any day of the week. And I think that persists even post a slightly different world, and therefore may continue. And I think, as you say, Nicci, I absolutely agree with you. It's up to us. It's up to us in positions of leadership to figure out how we don't just simply pass that burden down to the people who work for us, because I don't think that's the right thing to do either. I'd absolutely agree with you.
We'll be interested to take on this chat when you're longer than 4 days into the job, perhaps in 40 days. I'll call you on a Friday afternoon, Nicci. This being lynched. But no, so, in all seriousness, it's actually, that is a potential topic for another webinar, I think, in talking about health and well-being and burnout. Because I think, you know, many people will probably feel they've already reached that stage or gone through it. But I was going to take things in a slightly different direction just now and ask you, if I can, Nicci. How did you broach your sexuality at work? And have you ever felt that people have treated you differently because of that?
So I like everything, you'll hopefully, people who don't know me now after 40 minutes have probably worked out I've just been really open with it. I had the unfortunate experience of trying to plan a wedding during COVID, so I ended up with 3 wedding dates and things like that. So I did, you know, I've constantly shared that. I haven't, you know, definitely don't hide the fact that I have a fantastic wife who lets me be who I need to be, and I've found that there's been nothing but positive. There are, again, it goes back to, there are a couple of people that I could go back to in my career who have actively, you know, acted differently, so and almost discouraged that kind of openness, particularly in senior people, so board members, in terms of not attending things like the LGBTQ plus training and things like that, which is, I just think, is a really bad example to set. So yeah, I really simple for me. I've just always been quite open, had nothing but positivity from people that work for me and work with me at board level. And again, it might just reflect age and experience more than anything. At board level, I have had a couple where it is obviously where people have struggled to I guess understand or kind of find a common ground that they could have conversations about it rather than just almost shutting it down.
And it's interesting because we had one of our previous speakers was a Black female CFO. So it's, you know, a lot of the time we're working with on our webinars just female CFOs. It's interesting to have that sort of 2 protected characteristics. And I was interested to see if you ever felt that it had been a disadvantage in your career.
I think I've felt the disadvantage of being a female more than I have felt the disadvantage of being gay, to be honest. Largely, but like I say, there was an experience with a chairman who generally didn't like opinions from female, and then it made it even worse that that I was, you know, relatively open, that I was in a same-sex relationship. So yeah, that and how did I deal with it? I'd lost a lot of respect and I left that organisation. So that's ultimately how I chose to deal with it. That doesn't mean that everyone's as fortunate as I am to be able to but I think if you're good enough, people will always employ you. So you know, it's not, I'm not saying hand your notice in, storm off, make a, you know, but I made it very clear in the exit interviews, you know, that I was now, you know, I was going to be actively looking for a job. These were my reasons why, and these were the reasons I ultimately left the organisation. So yes, I've experienced it. It's not nice, but I imagine that there are people that have experienced much worse, and I tend to focus on the 99% of positivity that you get. You know, nothing but you know, positive shared. I write a blog every week to my team just because of, you know, COVID, not being able to be in the office, and it helps share a bit of information about what's going on, the kind of meetings that I'm attending, but also a bit about me. And I've had nothing but great feedback about that, because people then understand a bit more about you, and then people that have been able to contact me who haven't felt they could be as open, or, you know, about whatever their protected characteristic is, and they just feel then they've got someone that is like them, that they can have a conversation with, that, you know, that might have experienced similar things. And again, it's just being able to be there and say that if you've had any kind of bad experiences, probably most of us have, so get in contact. You don't have to go through it on your own, but you do ultimately have a choice about whether you accept it or not. And that's, again, it goes back to that values, behaviours and role modelling, and what it is that, what are the lines that you draw for yourself. You know, we talked about it in terms of work overload and everything else, but there are certain lines and certain things that we all have that we won't cross and we won't compromise, and that's just, you know, each of us will have our own, and then you will get those challenges at some point in your career, and it's how you then react. I think that also people either respect you or not for that in the long run.
I think you're never on your own. You might be on your own in the organisation you're in at the point in time that you're in it, but I think as we're kind of uncovering on this call, you can almost guarantee that you're not the first, and sadly you probably won't be the last. So the use of a network like this in terms of being able to share some of that feels incredibly useful. Vicky, I'm interested, do you think you can be too authentic? Do you think there is ever a point where you have to hold back part of your personality, part of something? Because I'm just interested.
I think there's a part of you that you need to keep stuff for yourself, because I think if you had no differentiation between work and home life, and I think you do need to keep part of you, just because that's who you are. There are certain things you don't share with certain friends and stuff like that. So I think the authenticity in terms of how scared you or I are as we walk into an ICB, not knowing what's going on. Do you want to share all of that you're not really quite sure what's going to happen in 4 weeks, never mind about 2 years? We probably don't share that stuff. There is stuff that we sugarcoat, and that there are bits about the organisation that we all work for that can drive you insane. The politics that goes on, some of the people that you have to deal with, that you won't share with people. You might share in confidence if you know someone's going to come across those kind of people, but those kind of opinions and things like that, I don't think. I think those are the boundaries of areas that you wouldn't share, because that becomes your opinion and forcing that on someone else. So I think that I'm very much of, although if I do come across those people, fair or no, I'm very much of the kill them with kindness approach, and then wipe the floor from, sweep the rug from underneath them while they've not realised it. But I think that your worries and fears and things like that, it's worth being able to say that you've been through them. I don't think it's worth. It's the gripes thing. Gripes go upwards. Gripes never go down. So if you're having a bad day about stuff, I don't think that's the thing that I would share all the time. I generally try and keep the motivation, positivity, those kind of energies quite high. I think if I was actually, telling you how I was feeling about some of the politics that was going on trying to shape an ICB, I'm not sure my team would want to work for it for much longer. So that's how everyone's feeling. It's not anything new, but I do think that there's a point of try and keep it positive. As much as it's good to share some of the experiences that you've been through, trying to still keep the motivation high, the motivation up for a team, I think is it's a responsibility, isn't it?
You mentioned earlier, Nicci, I thought it was a really good point, the value in being authentic with your peer group, so that when times do get tough, you've got that group of people to support you. And I think Therese has also just highlighted that as well, because it is a lonely role, the CFO role. Can I also ask as well, what's your view of what leaders can do to act as allies in equality and diversity? What more can those that are on this call do to support their peers or their colleagues through and to encourage them to be their authentic self?
It's a brilliant question. If we had the answer, I guess we'd have a better representation, wouldn't we? So all I think I can say is listen. But people, I think females in particular, struggle to reach out. We're brilliant at creating networks and things like that, but we're not as good at saying, well, where can I, who else has felt like this? How can I speak to someone? So reach out. There are so many people on this call. There are so many people that I've met that are more than happy to support anyone that is trying to, anyone that is either experienced anything, anyone that wants a conversation, anyone that is looking at furthering themselves or their career. Most people I've ever got in touch with, even some of the busiest people nationally, will find time. And so it is that being able to reach out. So which therefore I think our responsibility is to listen. Our responsibility is to do much more of those kind of reverse mentoring opportunities. And I think our responsibility is to push people forward. We talked about it right at the start. That actually, I think Sarah said something like, a guy will look at a job description. If it's got 50% of it, he'll say, yeah, I can go for that job. Whereas a woman will wait till they've ticked off every box on a person spec and job spec. So I think we've got a real responsibility to highlight the shining stars, to push them forward, to give them the confidence until they get to the point where they, that fake it till they make it. So I think that we've got to start championing people and pushing those members of our team and other teams and people that we just come across, dropping them a word, a line if you come across people in meetings or other forums, and just saying, what, you did a really good talk on that, or really liked your question on things like that, just to be able to boost that confidence level. Because I think, to me, that's one of the overriding differences. And if you look at it, the studies of British people versus Americans, and Americans are much more confident than Brits. We're very self-deprecating. So how do we build people's confidence and push them forward when they might not actually recognise that they're ready for those opportunities yet?
Thank you. And who's been your role model? Like who or maybe it's a group of people even that's pushed you forward when you had those doubts, or who's given you that confidence to be who you want to be in your career?
So I guess, like a lot of things, I mean, my mum is not. She always laughs because I did a maths degree, and numbers are my thing, but words are her, and people are her thing. So maybe I get that from her. But she was always kind of very much, her and my granddad, actually, who worked down the pits, said, I was the first person in our family to go to university. They just kept saying, there was no pressure, but it was just, do whatever you do, try and do it to the best of your ability, and do something that you enjoy. And whatever it is you end up doing, make sure that you and other people enjoy it. So from that perspective, that's where, my initial kind of determination and, just that, well, why can't I just keep doing? And I just kept moving up for as long as people kept offering me jobs. So I was like, well, I must be able to do that then. And what's the next step? In terms of career-wise, I've been really, really fortunate, and I've had, I would, somewhere between mentors and sponsors, really. So Elizabeth O'Mahony was one of the first who pushed me to go for the Director of Transformation, step outside of finance. And then I've been really fortunate with Caroline Clark and Sandra Easton as people that have kind of taken me under their wing and let me, have conversations with them and push me forward and told me what I can and can't do, but what the opportunities are outside of just one or two areas. And another one is Mark Mansfield, who Sarah will know. He, in the Midlands region, had always been, such a good regional director of finance to be able to pick up the phone and just talk about different opportunities. He was also really brilliant at giving you good and positive feedback and being really down, open and honest, and being a fan almost. I think he was fangirling on quite a few of us in the region. So I'm sure he told all of us that we were his favourites at one time or another. But to just have someone at a regional level that also has that kind of confidence and opened up, and he opened up networks for me, the likes of Sandra and Caroline and people like that. So he was one of the first people that really opened me up to how many fantastic females we've got in finance, then also that have moved into that kind of chief exec space. And I know Sarah's probably had similar experiences with Mark and others as well.
Yeah, I mean, Mark was a really big support for me. Also, I think I was really lucky. My first chief exec was, I've always described her as who I want to be when I grow up. I was incredibly lucky with my first chief exec. She was female. She was incredibly driven, and she inspired me like nobody's business. But I think, and that's kind of, I put it in the chat, if you find those people, hang on to them. They'll all be willing to come. I've never come across someone who wasn't willing to come with you, to talk to you, to carry on. And so collect them, because they're really useful in times where confidence is a challenge.
Thanks, Sarah. I think that's really great feedback, and I hope everyone's made note of that from the chat. So just one final question for you, Nicci, before I wrap up. So the people that are watching this that will feel that they've had to shape themselves in order to fit in and to progress their career, what advice will you give them?
I think my advice is, the best person that you can be is you, and to be honest, that's the role that you're going to be most confident in. So whatever job title's on your door, if you're not yourself, you're already 10 steps behind the next person that's doing that job. You know, you need to be confident in yourself, and the rest will come. The rest is learned. You know, no one suddenly wakes up and is given the job title of a CFO and walks in on the first day, knows how to do it, but they do know how to be themselves. And if you're yourself, you can build up the network, you can build up those people that want to work for you, you can motivate the staff that maybe don't to start off with, you know, and it's the one thing you don't have to worry about, because as I think a few people have said, these jobs can be really bloody lonely and scary and a whole load of other things. The last thing you want to have to worry about is what kind of version of you you're trying to be in the morning. So, you know, it's and I think particularly now, younger generations are much more perceptive. When they're much less about hierarchy, and just because you've got a job title doesn't mean they have to listen to you. So they buy into you as a person, and I think much more people now decide jobs based on who they want to work for and the types of organisations they want to work for, rather than the job title alone. So I think that's, to me, the key thing. The best person and the best version of you is you. That's who everyone needs to see. You can learn everything else.
That's fabulous. Thank you so much. I did have I'd made some notes about how to summarize it, but I actually think you've summarized it so neatly with the best person you can be is you. That anything else I say or add to that will actually detract from it. So I will leave that as the summary of what you've said today. But I just want to thank you both so much for taking part today. I know, Nicci, you didn't need to plan anything for today because you just had to turn up and be you. But I still really, really appreciate it. I know you guys don't have a great deal of time spare. So thank you for supporting the network and for being our speaker and co-host today. So just a couple of other things to mention. We are running a recorded repeat of this session on Wednesday, the 6th of July at 12 o'clock. So if there's anyone in your teams or your colleagues, your networks that weren't able to make this evening's session and they want to attend on Wednesday, then ask them to email me or let me know and I can send them a link for the Wednesday session. And failing that, if they miss that, I can send the recording from today as well. We are then taking a bit of a break for the summer, and our next webinar will be on the 14th of September at 5 p.m, where we'll be having 3 ICB DOFs. We'll be more than 4 days into the new job by then. And the subject of discussion will be new landscape, new leadership challenges. But again, we're looking at this from an angle of the female leader, and what this means going forward. Is it a more difficult environment? Is it an easier environment? It's something to discuss, and we really want to hear people's views on that as well. As ever, keep emailing us your feedback from these sessions and future topics that you want to be discussed. There's quite a few things came up today I think we could form or bring into future webinars. And please keep recommending us to your networks as well if you're enjoying these sessions. And thank you again to everyone that attended today. I will be staying on the call if you want to stay on for further chat, but otherwise, thank you again for coming and hope to see you soon.